This is Humans of the World with Pascal Risk. Inspiring stories of people from all around the globe. Tune in every Wednesday.
Hello, Ilona. So good to see you.
Pascal, so nice to see you.
I was so happy to meet you back home a month ago, and we had the chance to talk about this.
Yes, it was amazing. And it was such a big surprise for me too. You're showing up.
Yeah.
For Easter. It was
yeah,
lovely.
I came by surprise.
Very big surprise. Thank you. And we cooked up this. This is amazing too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Ilona, you had an eventful month in the Emirates, especially in Dubai.
I would say not only Emirates. There's a lot of politics going on lately in the Middle East and in the Asia. But it was eventful altogether, trying to get back, but all sorted. And we are expecting yet another rain in the Emirates, starting tonight, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, which is coming from Saudi Arabia somewhere. So we had precautiously prepared our house for the next rain.
Hopefully everything will go well. I'm not following a lot the weather forecast, but I hope you won't have damages, as last time.
Yeah,
on the nation scale. Hope everything will be well.
Always health is the most priority for us. So no matter what is happening with the houses, it's just a materialistic part of our life, which is not so important.
Absolutely.
But thank you for asking. That's very nice of you.
Ilona, tell me, where have you lived before the Emirates? So now you're in Dubai. How long have you been there and where have you been before?
We're actually hitting our 18th year in the Emirates, believe it or not.
Wow.
I know, it's flying by so quickly. We used to do everything pretty much 5± years. So before that, we were in Texas for a very long time, where my son was born. That's many, many years back now. He's 21.
My God, really, time flies, huh?
Time flies a lot. And before that, we were in California. And before that, we were in Montreal, where my daughter was born 25 years ago. And before that, obviously, in each of those countries, we lived in various places. So, I was moving houses quite often.
I guess that's something with 2 kids.
Yes, that's true. We were young and enthusiastic, and changes are always nice. And I followed my grandma's saying. She used to say, each time I moved, I redecorated the house, I bought new curtains, and I loved it. And she was only moving within the country. But I originally come from Prague, Czech Republic. That's where I was born. Both of my parents come from various regions in Czech. And so my mom is from the southern part, Moravia, which is very rich in culture, very rich in producing wine and lots of fruits. And my dad is from the hilly side. So they're both not from Prague, but they met in Prague. So that's where we settled. They settled first, and then that's where me and my brother were born.
I can't wait to visit you in Prague. I haven't been there yet. So hopefully we'll plan that soon.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, Ilona is not only a dear friend, she's also a relative and a neighbor. Whenever we get to catch each other at home, back in my homeland. Ilona, in all of these places where you live, so I suppose your kids now have multiple citizenships, right?
That's right. Well, except my son, who is American citizen by birth. We still have to work on the Canadian, and obviously it's not so easy to work on the Czech. But my daughter is Czech, Canadian, and I guess Lebanese by default, obviously. So is my son. Yes, multicultural, global citizens, which I think me and my husband will start counting ourselves the same way. Lately somebody's asked me where you're from, and I kind of started to think about it a lot lately. And I keep saying I'm a global citizen. Nothing should define me, and people being biases against, whatever I work at or whatever I do based on where I am from, because we've really moved a lot. We acquired a lot of cultures along the way. Me going to Lebanon so often, obviously, I'm part of the culture big time now, and partially by heart, by behavior. Same thing. Whenever we lived along, you pick up the best, if you may, and if somebody wants to. Obviously, somebody can pass by years and not even touch any other cultures, but I love it. So multiculturalism became to be a huge part of me, I think.
I was always stunned when I first met you. I don't remember how long was that ago. I really don't remember, but I was always amazed by your capacity of speaking the Arabic language, the dialect as well, because you speak also many languages, and also your openness, your openness and your openness to the culture, which is really very different from the culture you grew up in. And I suppose, moving and living in all these countries, this must have been very enriching for you, and I suppose also for your kids, which I greet, and your husband as well. And as you said, you tried to pick up the best of every place you lived in. Which place is the closest to your heart? Like, if you go back now and think of all the places you've been to.
I need Lungo for this, honestly. This is a very hard question. It's like somebody asks a child, who is your favorite a person in life? It's such a huge broad question, I think. What is my best and closest to culture? Really all at this point. I think except, if I may say so, except US. Everything was such a culture-rich environment with such a beautiful people around me, including the US actually, but culturally not so.
Yes.
But the people around me were just brilliant and beautiful, and I got so much out of it. But living in the UAE, I think the past 18 years, because it's the longest we've lived at this point, including my birth country, obviously Czech Republic, and then Lebanon. I think that's the mixture of these three countries, including Canada, actually, that's what defines me at this point. And what was the best? Really none I can just prioritize at. Everything gave me something. My child was born in Canada, and I got the best out of it while trying to learn about early childhood at that point, which was quite amazing. Got a lot from that side. Same thing with my child when he was born in US. There is a specific way of how you educate children at that point. Same thing with being brought up in Czech Republic. And that gave me a lot. And Lebanon with its rich culture. Same thing in the UAE, because it's such a melting pot. That's the whole globe I covered.
Yeah. I want to go back mostly to your upbringing in ex-Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic now. But I want to ask you something before we move to that. When you started your life with your husband, who you met in your country, and he came back and you got married, and did you decide on your life in the future? Like, were you moving from one country to the other with the mindset that you will be moving? So that's why you took the best out of it? Or it was just a decision of like, I mean, more like when you moved to the country, you tried to get the best out of it, not knowing what would happen in the future.
Yeah. When you think about it, you're young, you're in love, you want to start your family, and yet there is a security that you have to have in mind each time. And I think me and my husband were both quite mature at that point, understanding the need to secure the family in future. And so when he had to decide on taking job in another country, I obviously would never stop him or pull him back and say, I don't want to go there. That seems like it would be, first of all, unfair. It would be also impossible at that point, because we needed to secure the family, obviously, financially and culturally and everything else, and be fair to both of us, culture-wise. And so I think each step was quite thought through. And moving over to Canada and marrying, that time in Lake Placid, so United States, but we were in Canada at that point, was a huge step for us to start this whole movement.
How old were you at the time?
I was 21. My husband was a little bit over 25.
That's young.
Quite young. But that time people were very mature. I would say. It was
different era. Yeah.
Very different era. We were very mature. We kind of knew what we're doing. But it was somewhat spontaneous, somewhat brave. The bravery part was quite strong in it, I would say, just because if you don't do these things, you don't leap, you don't take the massive
jump,
jump with not knowing what is ahead of you, you just can't do things. But yeah, when you think about it, that time moving countries, continents is not an easy decision. It was not an easy decision at all, actually.
Bringing up a family, young kids, I mean, newborns, and then...
That time was obviously difficult. I mean, these days you just take a plane and you jump and that's it. That time airplane ticket was massively expensive. Everything you had to think through properly, be very vigilant in every step along the way. Yeah.
Ilona, and now you talk about early childhood. Tell me now about what you're doing in the Emirates, which is very interesting as well.
Yeah, I think I finally found my passion. In the Emirates, actually. And that was also partially because of the family needs. I wanted to stay in control to bring my family up myself, because myself, I'm not used to having helper in the household. And coming to Emirates, it was such a norm that I was still resisting for as long as I could have. And so I decided to take a job that would have allowed me to pick my children at the same time as they finished their school. So assisting in the school, and then early childhood educator was the next step for me, which gave me an independence. I obviously took a lot of courses, finished my degree in that domain. And that led me, after 13 years almost, to open my own business, which I thought was a natural move. You say after 40, you have to start sort of giving your knowledge back. And this is exactly what I started to do. Me and my beautiful colleague from Slovakia, we saw a gap within child's upbringing, which was in the secondary caregiving domain. So we started a company to upskill domestic helpers, which they call them in here. I don't like,
because this is very common in the Emirates.
Very common in the Emirates. So they call them maids or domestic helpers, domestic workers, and so on. I like to call them housekeepers - nannies, because they do all kinds of chores. Plus, they help with the children. So we kind of renamed it after we've consulted it with some Australian.
And professors. They aren't usually Emirati. They're usually immigrants from different parts of the world, right?
That's right. They come from various countries. I think according to the statistics, the number one are from Philippines, then India, then Indonesia, and then African countries, and so on and so on. So it's those are nannies or helpers that come from various other countries other than the United Arab Emirates, obviously, and we saw the need to help these lovely, beautiful ladies that have various backgrounds, usually somewhat different in socio-economic backgrounds, various knowledge backgrounds that might not necessarily match those people that had very different opportunities during their upbringing in terms of knowledge in childcare or child education. And so we sort of wanted to help them. And it's like a mission for us with my colleague to help as many beautiful ladies as we can, to give them the gift of knowledge. We literally call it the seeds of knowledge. And I think that's the power, isn't it, in life? Not only to be educated.
It's beautiful, because you are giving people the tools, not looking at their social categorization, I may say, because that happens a lot in the Middle East, but you're giving them the tools to be the best they can in their own professions, wherever they are. We've always talked about knowledge, me and you, and we've talked about science. And when we start talking about, neuropsychology and everything, but we've never, I've never heard you say it as beautifully as you are expressing now, with the utmost respect to these people coming from different places. I am always in awe, because I moved myself from a country to another. I'm always in awe in front of those who leave countries and start a life elsewhere. It takes a lot. It takes a village for them,
It takes a
to move
courage.
forward.
Yes.
Yeah, courage, and you have to question
Very uneasy.
yourself, and I think the beauty of you yourself living in so many cultures gave you as well, the life experience besides the scientific or the literature or the knowledge or, all the degrees and the formation and the training courses you've been to help those people and give them the best tools, with everything you do. Yeah.
It is a tool for them, right, Pascal? And I feel that this is exactly that I found myself with my colleague. This is my mission in life, and so is hers. And we feel like now we can sort of peacefully part the life whenever it's time for us, with knowing that we had given back to the society, and this is our utmost importance. And we felt that each day when we work on the courses, because we always constantly redo the courses after almost each of the training, we do
personalize them.
We personalize them all the time. 100%. We always usually interview the ladies first, if it's possible. If we need translator, we translate, and then we see their own capabilities. There's a lot of language barriers most of the time. The way they understand, how much knowledge previously they already have, what is their educational background and their capabilities to actually understand the content. And so almost all the time we simplify and change and tweak and this and that. And obviously to still keep it within the copyrights part, which is quite strict worldwide now, within keeping the norms for what words can you and you cannot say. And we customized it for the region, 100% customize it for the region. So our kiddie care coaching company is now being known, I think, for the ability and the flexibility to deliver the courses as best as we can, as personalized as we can, for each of the customer practically. And it's the same thing with pricing, the same thing with marketing. We feel that we cannot simply just bring a course into this region and say this is what we sell, and we don't believe in it ourselves, because there's a different norms, and we love to support the culture. Obviously. The authorities that we work in Abu Dhabi has obviously asked us to add a lot of cultural heritage within the UAE, because obviously when they work with families within the region, they need to know the norms and the culture, and we love this.
Absolutely, this is very important to integration.
Yes, they're losing the culture, right? It's very easy if they're the minority in the country. Their children would easily lose the culture once you don't know how to deliver the course to someone who then needs to educate the child, and they would only use their own culture and impose their own culture on the child. That's very difficult, if you know what I mean. And then we try to teach them, yes, you do have a culture, but we need to also teach you how to be multicultural a person. And that's that way you need to also be able to educate the children or take care of them the same way.
This is very empowering, not only to the women, but it's also providing support to a better society. I mean, you play a crucial role in the education, because this is the reality. This is the reality. I mean, in the Emirates, people have helpers, whether we like that or not. And you've made your personal choices yourself, so you know how hard it is to balance, both professional life and context of life far from your family members. So you don't have grandma and grandpa to help you, So you really understand the true need, and this is really beautiful. So keep up the good work.
Thank you. That's very nice of you to say. Thank you. It's beautiful. It's the mission, if it's going to be really fulfilled, and we'll get it to the level we want to, which is going to be some sort of nationally standardized courses, which we developed already. It's moving it to a higher level, and we're trying to help the most.
I know you put your heart.
Yes, totally.
You will reach there
one day, hopefully.
Ilona, let's go back a bit to your childhood. So as I said earlier, So you were born in ex-Czechoslovakia, right? Which became Czech Republic afterwards. I would like you to share with us some of those daily aspects, daily life aspects that were very common during that epoch. And, because I suppose in the 80s, you were young, very young.
Very young.
So I want to talk about that with you. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, many people had asked me this question, and I'd like to judge it or tell you about it from my inner child, if I can pull that out.
Yes, that's a beautiful perspective.
Right. As much as I can to bring myself to the childhood, because if I judge it from the perspective of having masters, I'm somewhere completely else. Okay.
Yeah, but or as an adult,
obviously
as you look back on things, you're much more analytical
100%,
and,
very much analytical. And so there's no bad or good, and not to judge the political situation, but my upbringing was happy upbringing. Very happy, actually. Happy because of a couple of ways that we grew up. And I'd like to point that. So you have to divide the upbringing before 68 and after 1968. I'm born after 1968, which I would like the listeners to perhaps research that on their own. I don't want to get into politics here whatsoever. And after I was born in the 70s, and it was a huge wave of children being born. They're called the Husaks generation. It was a little bit of like many families took a breath after 1968. It was a little bit of like open-mindedness came up, a little bit of more freedom. It wasn't so harsh to live in the communism anymore. The West slightly opened for a little while, at least. So people opened the door, got the fresh air, came back and started a family with this hope that there's going to be a different kinds of era for them. And so I'm one of the child. So my parents were hopeful. They were hippies. They were such a happy family. I was growing up in very, very happy family. Both really hardworking parents, a beautiful brother. We were just having great childhood. My early childhood was as happy as that. My nursery was obviously what I now promote to be the naturalistic kind of education. We were having a little forest preschool. We were playing outdoor all the time. If it rained, we would get a raincoat and jump in the puddles, and something we try to now bring back to the childhood of children. Somewhere successfully, somewhere not so. And this was sort of such a beautiful memories that I have. At the same time, we were under what we can call these days normalization. So we were one of those norms that we had to sort of live by. We were sort of copy-pasted children at that point. So you live in an environment where you start understand that you're one of many, almost similar to your peers. Or the same, when you are asked to raise your hand, you only raise your hands when you're asked. You don't just inquire. You're not supposed to query or ask questions about the world or anything other than the subject being taught. So you're somewhat being limited. Okay. And when you grow up more and more, you start understanding, why can I just ask a question that comes to my mind? So being in the school somewhat limited and molded as a log that needed to look like my peer exactly the same way. I brought this into my family. So I would always ask these questions to my dad or my mom, and my dad was always trying to express himself and ask me the questions. What do you think about that? So I became the inquirer just because of my family, not so much because of my school. In my school, we came to be categorized into certain levels. So I was the labor child. So I was in the category of, my dad was a plumber. My mom was having a great job. Actually, at that point, she was in the textile industry and purchasing fabric for the 5 years ahead. Can you imagine? Without statistics, without computers, without anything, she had to calculate how much fabric to buy.
The intuition, the insight, and the strategic planning.
Strategic planning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Completely amazing skill that she acquired along the way. Because I kept asking her the same question now, being in the business myself, how she predicted 5 years, how many kilometers of that fabric would have sell in the stores, as a matter of fact. So she would go to the factories and buy that fabric and then supply the stores within the Prague region. She had the Prague region and the mid region, which is amazing skill. Like, I don't know how she did it. And my dad worked 2 jobs at one point, but he was always there for us. I mean, he came back at 3 or 4 o'clock, always taking care of us. My mom, no later than 5 o'clock, I think. So we were always having dinners together and fun together and walks at night and skiing in the afternoon, even in Prague. There was a lot of snow that time when I was growing up. And having fun activities. Weekends were always in the cottage house. My parents rebuilt a very damaged cottage house, and that was part of our life growing up.
I can see a lot of that in you now, I know how you raised your kids, so I can see a lot of that in how you raised your kids, trying always to favor activities out in the nature and what you do. I mean, whenever we cross each other in the town, in the village, you're always doing things and being creative in the outside. And I think you took a lot of your parents, your parents' skills, and
but many people were like
happiness.
This.
Yeah, but the happiness you talk about, it shows, it shows in your constant perseverance and positivism.
Yeah, that's true. And, at the same time, when you think about it backwards, we were part of the youth movement pioneers, for example, when we had to have the uniforms, and we wanted to be part of the movement, which my dad would disagree with, but he never stopped me from doing it. So I wanted to belong, because if you don't belong, you feel like you're derailing. And the derailing was actually the not part of the norm, and you would feel awkward. So we were always somehow trying to get back to the norm. And that's what we were supposed to. But also communism taught us a couple of good parts. One of them was probably loving culture, even if the culture was somewhat defined. But there was a lot of different aspects of the culture. Our artists, scenarists, people that created films, people that were creating a play in the theater. There was always underlined message in most of the cultural aspect of it. And the underlined message we learned to decode. This was such a beautiful thing. And when I think about it now, it's like a skill you actually have to learn.
Absolutely. I mean,
they were against the regime. Exactly. They were against the regime, but in the way that we had to decode it. It's beautiful, because now whenever I see movies and it doesn't have a secondary message or underlining message, I feel like, oh, it's boring. It doesn't give me anything. I'd like to decode things, and it was really fun.
I mean, when you were telling us, just describing a couple of minutes ago, you talked about discipline, in the school, but you also talked about the dimension of freedom that your parents gave, or your father particularly, in allowing you to question things, So it's always we grow up balance. Always when there's crisis and clash between two situations, right? So it's discipline and freedom being built up. Then you talked about the fact that you needed to belong. So there's always this feeling that you have something different, but you need belonging, right?
That's right.
To have a balance. So it's all, it's all about working on the self. There are so many things that unfortunately today are not happening or taking place, because people are much more receptive to things. As you said, you watch something and it's so evident, or sometimes people don't have the patience to try to find out what the message is behind,
Yeah. This is such a nice question, Pascal, because when you asked me this question also previously, I actually happened to do the Masters of Education at this point. And I had brought this within the educational aspect, or the upbringing during the communism educational aspect of the Marxism, Leninism in it. I have studied many articles and, literature and scientific literature, everything. And there's a lot of movements these days that There was a lot of good parts of it, obviously, and that's what we need to bring back into education somewhat. And I started to study myself, if you can say it that way. And it's very interesting, because the past year I've been reflecting on my own childhood, on my own educational upbringing in that sense, and trying to understand who I became, who I was, who I want to be, in a sense to deliver the best I can for the future generations in the educational aspect, if you think. And that actually projected into understanding the different cultures, and it's all sort of intertwining, including, understanding the nannies and their position in life. And it's all so connected.
Absolutely. If you look back at it, really, really, it's also connected. You've experienced differences in eras, epochs, cultures, languages, backgrounds. Yes. And now you get to put all of that together and, try to use it in order to contribute to a better future.
100%. The critical thinking is just going on within me all day long at this point, not criticizing, but critically think about things. And so I stopped criticizing long time ago, because there's no system that is bad. You just have to understand it, how it's designed, why is it designed, why was it designed that way, what was the purpose of it, what was the ultimate goal of the epoch, like you used to you used a beautiful word about it, and what is my role in it. And I think that if I didn't have that upbringing, I would not be the educator that I am right now.
Absolutely.
And probably not so dedicated either, because there's no richness in life. And I think now I have such a rich background.
Yes.
If I can say that.
This is something so beautiful to discover. And I would say now, if I don't know, but if to my younger self, I would say, just hold on and wait. You'll get the point out of it, Now that I'm also in my early 40s, I really understand why so many things took place and what is behind, what was coming, after everything I've been through and I've experienced. And this is so true. And something else, Ilona, often it used to happen to me that I would say, I'd rather live in a different epoch. There's too much suffering in the world, or so many miserable things taking place. And like people, friends and scholars around me, they would always say, Pascal, every time has its own things, so right. It's like an invitation, a constant invitation to, as you said, to live the time, seize the time we are
just be open-minded.
We are living in, be open-minded, and try really to see what we can do best, like our role at that specific moment. Because every decade has its own, political clashes, economic situations, downfall, everything. So this is so true.
Yeah.
Let me go back to you now to the 1992, when your country changed, and what is your recollection of that?
That was also such a powerful moment in my life. Because of my dad got through the open door in 1968, and he left to West to work for Ford Company for a little while, but then he came back, and then the doors closed again, the borders closed. He kind of got this hope for a change, and he probably by default again, he would have bring that into the family upbringing, and or my upbringing minimum. And he always wanted for us, me and my brother, to sort of go out into the world and experience what is out there, and then decide for ourselves where we want to be. And it was me that actually left. I think he was speaking more about my brother that time, but it was me who's left, actually, thanks to my husband. And we started to discover the world together, which is amazing up until now. But 1992 was when we were enthusiastically escaping the school. I was at high school that time. We literally broke through the door of the school, jumped off the windows, and became part of the move of the change, the Velvet Revolution, what you call it. And little we knew, where is this going to be leading? We didn't know if we're going to be crushed or it's going to be peaceful. No one knew, right? And we took the chances. Then came New Year's Eve. We were celebrating with various different nations that came immediately into Prague to celebrate. We heard various languages all around us all of a sudden. That time, before that, we learned languages because I'm part of Europe, many nations, and you go literally a little bit beyond the borders and you have to know another language. That time, English
Everything
was
is
not
different.
universal. It was not universal language. So we kind of learned various languages, at least bits and pieces, in hope one day we will use them, which we maybe would never, if the communism still continued and borders would have been closed, we never would have used them. However, we did. And so all of a sudden you hear Italian and German and English, and Americans came and I don't know who else. And we were like, oh my God, there's a world past the border. That's quite rich. And for me, it was a culture-rich environment at that point. I didn't take it into, I'm going to start my business or whatever's happening. That time we were just so in hope, longing for a change, not knowing where this is going to lead us. It was an era of massive open door and opportunities. My mom immediately seized the opportunity, left her job and opened her own shop. So we were drawn into helping her with opening a job. I was only 14. The shop became to be a family business. And we were all involved in it, which was a fantastic idea. And gave us, again, brought us together a lot more as a family. That time I finished another school, and in the afternoon I came to help her. My dad was involved in it, my dad too. It was just amazing. And again, the whole family was involved. So opportunity.
You are hard workers. I can see that.
I think I most worked until I was probably, 30. And now I feel like I've done a lot.
Yes.
I was running 3 jobs at the age of 18 to 21, 3 jobs. And so it was an amazing. I was just swallowing the opportunities, jumping into every single open door that was there, learning more languages, and hoping that things will change even more so, that I will literally go out. And yes, I met my husband and it happened. However, there was a lot more to it. As things started to progress, a lot more people started to lose jobs because all the opportunities we had during the communism and the norms that were there set up for people, factories started to close. Some factories were bought by, the neoliberalism sort of came, and the capitalism came, and all of these other things. And I don't think so. We have a space for this time. That's a completely different explanation of my second half of my life was to be like, or what I would think about it these days.
Maybe we can come back to that on a second episode, because this is so enriching from somebody who experienced that,
the break point.
But now, Ilona, how much of that mindset is still visible in your home? Like, in the culture of Czech Republic today, the social norms, the tradition, the mindset.
You still have generation like mine, and then my parents and my grandparents. My grandparents' generation would have been somewhat also touched by the Second World War. My mom and dad's generation, so the 70s, now they'll be 70, 80 and so on. They were in the harder core of the communism. So a little bit of harsher than what I grew up with, because we could listen to underground music. We could listen to somewhat, you could have gone out for a little while to various places if you fulfilled the right paperwork and they allowed you to. You had to leave your kids behind normally, things like this. Only 1 member or 2 members of the family were allowed at that point, things like this. And I don't know. When I go back now, I still see there's a lot of part of Czech Republic and a couple of generations that are still going to outgrow this. But I feel the young generation is not learning enough about the history these days, and they don't understand the momentum that we lived in, and they don't want to learn about the history either. They feel like, maybe partially because their parents might be involved in that somehow, or the school is not adding it into the history. I don't know. The educational system is somewhat a bit older, I would say, right now, and needs a little bit of reform. That's another part of it. But culturally, it's still there. Culture and celebrating culture is still beautiful. We still, as a nation, love going to concerts and theaters and so on. So that's, I think it's the good part that still continues. So there's a lot of good part that still stayed, and perhaps some not so good parts that still is embedded in people's life.
I've noticed through my studies that wherever there was political turmoil, let's put it that way, the educational system has difficulties setting or putting in place one history book, you know, and working on some solid knowledge of history.
Progress.
And this is very common and repetitive in many countries. Like people would learn about the history, if they learn some of it, according to probably their political background. And I find that really problematic.
Yeah, that is problematic.
Because there's no objectivity, you know?
No objectivity.
And it's very biased. Right. It's very biased. And if you do not educate yourself about our history or the history of every country in the world, you know, because now we are so open to each other and we need to understand more where everybody comes from. This is my belief, you know? And I really find it problematic nowadays that the upcoming generations know so little about history, you know?
History is always... Sorry to jump into this, but history is always written by the winners, right? So
that's beautifully said.
It's true. And I don't know who said it, actually, not me, definitely, but I've read it somewhere. And I thought, this is exactly how I go by it. Every time I read about historical book, winning of wars, it's always written by the winner. And so you have to take it from what happened to the loser, what happened to who's lost. Absolutely. What happened to that nation? Where is the nation right now? And so this is how I sort of like reflect on my childhood the same way.
And I think also keeping memory, you know, going back to memory is really important to adjust behavioral change, you know, to work on our ways of doing things for the future. If we lose every reason or knowledge from the past, we won't be able to work on a better future. It's a must. This is what I believe. Now, I understood with you, Ilona, that because you took time and you chose to bring up your own children, you put a lot of knowledge of your personal life and of your studies and your passion into this. So, if my final question to you is, what would you have liked your kids to experience besides what you were able to give them? Like, of course, you brought up your kids with your husband as you chose to, but there's also the outside part, the external part, you know, the society, the schools they've been to, the cultures they were living in. So what would you like them to experience from your own childhood?
Yeah.
I don't know. My question sounds reasonable. Is it understandable?
Very reasonable, because this is exactly the question that I ask many families when we do the courses, obviously, you know. So our courses are designed for early childhood.
Early childhood meaning between 0 to
8. Yeah, 0 to 8. Yeah, so we educate caregivers, child caregivers specifically, in child care development or child care itself, or child health skills, in what we call early childhood. So, for example, my children experience during the summers and the holidays a little bit of the nature, but not as much as we did. Me and my husband together, I think we both were very similar in that sense. I was telling my daughter this morning, actually, how happy it was when we could have gone outside immediately after the school. We had, you know, analog telephones, and that rang immediately after I come back from school, and my friend would invite me to go outside, or the neighbors would ring and we would disappear until you hear different kinds of whistle from different kinds of windows. There was no mobile.
Yeah.
They're cold.
Just listening to that, my heart is echoing, with joy.
Yes, it is. It is. And my daughter was looking at me, like, yeah, we have a sign. We have a different kinds of sound in terms of whistle, a specific one that we call each other within the family. And so I knew that it's my parents who are calling, or the kids in the street. Even being in Prague, we had a lot of parks everywhere. Parks were just a beautiful side of Prague. It's green, quite green. The other kids would have said, your mom is calling you for dinner. They would know the whistle and the sound of the whistle.
Yeah. The little old things.
I know. And so we had that kind of freedom of being outside as much as we wanted to. Obviously, I grew up in forest and picking up berries and picking up mushrooms ever since I could probably crawl as a child. And that I wished for my kids a lot more. Unfortunately, that we could have provided them, because the fact that we live in Texas, it was a different kinds of environment and we were more in the city. We tried as much as we could have, but it's all sort of artificially created, the camping, and it's still within enclosure. It's not the free camping as I experienced. And then you go to forest school, but it's not the natural forest school that I grew up with or in. And same thing for my husband. He grew up in the mountains of Taras Baalbek, and then I grew up in forests that I don't even know their names anymore. And then again, we either heard the whistle somewhere in the middle of the forest or we didn't. And then we would be like, where are you? Where did you get lost? And I told you have to be home at a certain time. And we didn't have a watch. We just looked at the sky and we could see the sun setting or being above our heads and knowing that it's lunchtime. So these kind of things, I think, is something that my kids still experienced a little bit, but my daughter says we probably are one of the last generation, for example, compared to the kids in here in UAE, that we experienced that. And it's sad because I feel the connection to nature is the basic of human, or what defines humans. And being separated from it more and more and more may actually create a lot of anxieties and depressions and so on. So I feel like this is something that if every child had at some point of their childhood possibility to do that and experience it, then I hope the listeners would be able to provide that for kids, even if it's a half a year, longer time, not just kind of visit the country and go back. There were no fences.
Yeah, it brings a lot of healness. You see nowadays, whoever wants to take a break or run away from the city chaos, they would resort to calmer places in the nature, in the country they live in or in other countries. But it's always about being in contact with the nature.
And being able to do it these days, it's almost like you have to have the finances for that. Sometimes if you live in a country.
It's like an elite thing,
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. Go to retreats and this and that. But for me, I go to my cottage house, put my rain boots and go to the forest whenever I want to. The good part of my country is still that we don't, even if it's privately owned forest, we're not allowed to restrict foreigners anyone to go in. You have to open it to anyone. There's no fences. So the fenceless kind of country, it's beautiful. You just go anywhere. You pick up berries anywhere. No one should tell you no unless you damage it or whistle and so on. You can't. But this is the nicest part of it. And I hope it will never change into the full-on capitalism where there will be fences and we cannot even go to the forest. I think I will suffocate.
I think in every country there will always be free places to go to. It's just working on our mentality to look for these places and regard that looking and finding natural spaces is as important as having a degree or passing an exam or studying a chapter while we're educating kids. I think it's the mental change that we need to work on, just like you're doing in your own job, to open up and go seek places where we are in contact with nature. No simulations, no technology, all of these things.
My kids know this, and it's very nice to have that in them, or they recognize that this is something they enrich their life now, and then they cherish this on daily basis. I think they really talk about it a lot these days, how fortunate they were when they were growing up with us.
This is beautiful. This is rewarding, I suppose, for you as a parent.
maybe not everybody's so fortunate, and whenever they have the opportunities, they should really provide that for children if they can somewhat.
Yeah.
Not limit them to the technology only these days. And so, but
Ilona, thank you so much for being with us in Humans of the World. That was so enriching. I love that we could take coffee with our listeners.
Yes.
We usually, when we get together, we spend as much as we can, talking and sharing. And I love that. I appreciate that. I'm so happy that we were able to do this with our listeners. Thank you for the enriching background, everything you've shared with us, your current job, your passion, what you're doing. I hope in the future we get to talk more about that, probably. And say hi to everyone.
I will. Thank you so
hope
much.
you won't have a disastrous storm in the Emirates tonight. And looking forward to meeting you again in person very soon.
Hopefully. Thank you so much, Pascal, for inviting me. This is beautiful. I love listening to your podcast. So I'm very happy to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ilona. Thank you. Much love. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Take care. Bye.
That was Humans of the World with Pascal Risk. Available on Spotify and YouTube. Music by Gabriel Sassi.